Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes on the hillside, little boxes all the same. There's a pink one and a green one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university where they were put in boxes and they came out all the same. And there's doctors and lawyers and business executives, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same.
So, hi everyone. We have Ashish Jaiswal with us today, and I'm really looking forward to listening to what he has to say about various things. And I thought I would just start the session by reading out a poem by Khalil Gibran called Self-Knowledge, which I came across today and I thought was very interesting and possibly even relevant. And a man said, "Speak to us of self-knowledge." And he answered, saying, "Your hearts know in silence the secrets of the days and the nights. But your ears thirst for the sound of your heart's knowledge. You would know in words that which you have always known in thought. You would touch with your fingers the naked body of your dreams. And it is well you should. The hidden wellspring of your soul must need rise and run murmuring to the sea, and the treasure of your infinite depths would be revealed to your eyes. But let there be no scales to weigh your unknown treasure, and seek not the depths of your knowledge with staff or sounding line. For self is a sea boundless and measureless. Say not, I have found the truth, but rather, I have found a truth. Say not, I have found the path of the soul. Say rather, I have met the soul walking upon my path. For the souls walk upon all paths. The soul walks not upon a line, neither does it grow like a reed. The soul unfolds itself like a lotus of countless petals. So with this, I leave it to you, Ashish.
Wow, you know that poem sums it up. I don't think I have any more to say on top of it. Such a beautiful poem and such a beautiful start. I welcome everyone who is here, and I have to first thank the Cuckoo family and this beautiful space, because I think that the moment I got an email from you, Mira, I have been very happy because I felt the vibrations, the energy, and I was so happy that in these times when everything seems a bit gloomy, I could look at my tribe and look at the people who have been working quietly and kind of uh, you know doing perhaps what should be the end result of education. So thank you so much, and thank everyone for coming. And I like while we were talking about when we were talking while we were testing, um, I can start by touching upon a thought which has been in my mind, sort of an essence of what I think is perhaps lacking in our educational journeys, and then we can kind of move ahead. Uh, I somehow feel that we can kind of divide our educational journey on kind of two parameters. One is the content, and the other one is container. So when I say that, I mean that you know most of the time our curriculum, our school curriculum, our college curriculum, our own journeys, and people around us, they focus, or they ask us to focus on the content, which is either you have to be a biology expert or a mathematical expert or physicist or chemist. So the entire curriculum almost throws us into this whirlpool by just ignoring the container, which is our mind. So, no one talks about the formation of mind, how we use it. So I've kind of, I mean, off lately, I've started seeing as two distinct things, that there is one content and there is the whole different world of container. And there are books, there are texts, the poem which you just read, all those serve that container, and that formation is often missed. And whenever we are in such times, or whenever we kind of, as I often say, that want to sleep well at night, searching our purpose, what is right, what is wrong, conflicts, pressure, stress, happiness, enlightenment. In all that, I think the container plays a very important role. That how you negotiate the content, the knowledge. And I often struggle to find books and material and people and experiences and poems, which are in the direction. I keep looking for them in the direction of strengthening the container. So I think that once we start seeing the education in these two kind of spaces, then comes the journey of what you do with that container. How do you strengthen it? How do you then start seeing the content? So, for example, there is one book which it's called Theory of Knowledge. It's also compulsory text in GCSEs and IB boards. It's like one of the books which kind of takes you in the realm of uh, what are biases, how do I objectively see the truth, the eventual destination of truth, my own purpose, what if I encounter any conflict, an argument, what if I don't disagree with my friend, what if somebody pressurizes me, bullies me, so all these aspects are very important. And I think that that's one of my big learnings, that I keep focusing in terms of gaining knowledge as well as working on my container. And hence perhaps I feel that probably that's the area I'm most comfortable with. And Fluid, the book which I wrote, is in that direction, that how arrive at the eventual truth, by breaking our own biases and leaving them behind. And how do we kind of negotiate our identities, which is the world is trying to slot us in these boxes, these identities, and kind of trying to tell us that you have to walk on this line, this path, and this is your eventual end result of your educational journey. And it often only sees us as a professional being. Now, the system now just sees us that this professional being, and not as a human being, that we are what purpose we serve in this whole system as a cog, and what eventually is our contribution to that. And when it comes to us individual, like our happiness and our sort of freedom and free spirit, it just kind of slots you, and it just says that, okay, this is how you should have your vocational journey. This is what is selling, this is how you sell yourself, this is how you make more money. And the whole kind of system is geared towards the direction where it's all about markets, it's all about who's earning more, competition, thrashing the other person, trampling the resources, and kind of moving ahead. And sometimes people do it reluctantly, sometimes people do it deliberately, but most of the time it's a struggle when someone who thinks about why someone is here and what someone is doing on this planet Earth, you kind of want to ask these questions, but you don't get the outlet. You somehow are confused that I want to go somewhere else, create a beautiful world, but my journey, my learning, my education, my milestones, they push me in the direction of this this shallow chase, or chasing the shadow kind of a state. And I think that all these questions are very important if one sits down and sort out. And I think uh, fluidity is one of the first steps which I feel when you are looking at any profession, because unless you start looking at your subject with the lens which comes from the outside, and where you are kind of looking at that, oh, I'm not bound by what I'm being taught, there is something more. And then you are kind of bringing everything together, and trying to create sort of a world which is more holistic, more truthful. And because I think that the first and the foremost step is to break the cages which you create for yourself. And that happens when we are looking in a very sort of tubular manner at our lives, at the knowledge, at the truth, and not kind of giving any room to somebody else's view, alternative views, uh, and to get more wisdom served to us. So I think that that's what I feel, and I thought that I'll start with the container and the content analogy, and also the professional being and the human being, that we should stick to remain human beings. And it's difficult, but I think that that's the one of the sort of I would say the purposes of education, that once we finish the journey, or once we even continue further, anything which takes us away from it will not only bring us closer to machines, but will also put more pressure on us. So I think that in the race of automation or artificial intelligence, how closer we are to remaining what we were born as, rather than being a byproduct of the system. So I think container and content, and human being and professional being, perhaps, and adopting fluid thinking. That's how I thought that I should lay it out. What do you think? Should I just keep on speaking? You have any points to make, or what do you
Please
say?
continue. Yeah.
So another thing which while I was talking to you, I thought that maybe I can touch upon. So as I said, that the first step is the awakening, where you are awakened to realize that, all right, this is not what is for me, and I am feeling caged. I am feeling little uncomfortable in this rat race, and I want to bring change. But that is the first step. That's awakening. You are awakened. But as I said, that you know the second step is that, how do you then stand as this free spirited change maker? What happens? What you do, where you are not bogged down by the wheel, the system, and you keep on continuing your life and preserving the purest thought which kind of are there in our hearts and mind. So that is the second step, and that's where I feel the biggest challenge arise. That if you're, let's say, you are studying architecture, and then you want to practice a contributory architecture, organic architecture, sustainable architecture. You want to contribute with your field, and you're looking for places to work which are aligned to your soul, to your dreams. And that is where people are finding lesser and lesser opportunity, because the markets generally tend to work on the principle of exploitation, and there are this pressure of that what is our output, end result of our output. And I think that that's the problem which someone who's awakened faces continuously. That how do I survive paying my bills, carrying on my mission, realizing my dreams. How do we do that? So that is the second, I would say, the step after awakening. And I find that challenging, because that is where, how do you arrive at that balance where you are able to do what you want to do, but at the same time you're not losing on any of the 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 ethical principles you've laid down for yourself. And I think that is where being open to the questions which are put across to us, taking them on very openly and transparently helps. That never shy away from any question. For example, if somebody comes up and say that your model is wrong, how would you help? This would not help the world. Then we should, shelter under reflection, curiosity, logic, and application of mind rather than something else. We should be able to negotiate all these questions and take them front on and arrive at an answer, that how do we counter this question or this challenge, rather than saying that no, I don't want to look into that direction. Because that's how you strengthen the people, the tribe. Like I said, that if you are successful by following these principles, you will act as an inspiration to everyone around you to follow this path. Because right now, we are being served through media that who are your leaders, who are your inspirations, people who earn like the salary packages, $100,000, investment bankers, who has made this kind of startup, that kind of startup. So media will fuel these kind of stories, and those stories in turn will affect the young mind, that I have to chase those dreams. Because if the society or will not have right kind of examples, and they're also kind of inspiring. So I come from the school of thought that if you are following this alternative path, or this path where you want to serve the planet and serve the world, and you want to do everything without making any compromise, then it almost becomes your duty to kind of do it with almost like a mission, and without feeling any sense of remorse, without getting into any sadness, because the the better you will do, the more inspiring it will be for people around. If I look at any inspiring figure, like I get a lot of inspiration from APJ Kalam, and when I see him, it gives me so much happiness and so much strength, because I feel that here was an individual who, his conduct, his gestures, his aura, his words, all of them, they were in the direction of inspiring someone to follow that path. So I think that uh, uh, once you are awakened, you have to also walk on the path of creating successful example of yourself in this world, which is kind of, it's like pressurizing you from all the directions so that you fail in the end. And often people fail, and one of my biggest, um, I would say that quest is to find individuals who have remained pure, right? A lot of people start with purity, but as the path goes along, in terms of their intentions and knowledge, they somehow are taken away by the, I would say, the lure of materialism or the lure of the world, and somehow they become little less of what they were promising. And I think that that also sometimes does disservice to the world, that you carry on false realities, and you are like that I am proclaiming to be this person, but I am not. That's why it's very important to take on the questions which are related to your livelihood, related to empowerment, related to even some kind of comfort to your life, if you are honest about them, that I need this comfort, and I need this comfort because I want to serve people or because of something else, if you are open, uh, I think that that's something which is the second step. Because let's assume that if I've come up with a product and I'm claiming that it is an organic product and it serves what it says, now people will definitely believe you in the first go. They will say, all right, because you have done it, you are saying it, we will believe you. But imagine the second time if I use it and if I find that, oh no, this is, just a story, this is not real, then you're not only doing disservice to you, but you're also doing disservice to the cause. And people just then will stop believing. So I feel that, it's very important to remain honest in what you are doing and keep challenging yourself and never shying away from the questions which are very practical, which are very, which, so you should just be open to taking any kind of question and be open about your own vulnerabilities, own limitations. Like as I said, that once I ended my journey of Oxford, although I was born in India, I had pretty much, rooted in the Indian culture and uh, felt that I have seen India, I know India. But when I was like after my PhD and I was teaching there and I was kind of seeing the world, I somehow there was this thing inside me that have I completed my educational journey? Do I know enough? Is this what it is? I wasn't sure that is it time now for me to just go out and share what I know with the world? Uh, I wasn't sure and I wasn't certain, and I still am not. So I just came back to India and then started traveling, and I spent a lot of time in southern India. And when I started traveling, I realized that I've only done half of the journey. I was this person who was too much driven by my mind. And I'm saying it with a lot of responsibility, that I'm not saying that you should move away from the objective lens or the logical lens or scientific lens. But there is something which is very difficult to put in words, which you learn from the real life. And that is where I started kind of looking at this newer dimension, which was more driven by the life lessons of the ground, people who were bringing real change and being very happy about what they were doing. They were not scientists. They were not this, had these big qualifications, but they were bringing very important change and doing so much for the world. And that is where I realized that I have only half learned, and I have to learn so much. And I then started, opening up my heart, also connecting more with nature, and that was also the time I kind of became closer to nature. And I realize now that I gained a lot. Not that I'm negating anything what I learned in England or in Oxford, but after that, what I have learned has been equally important. I cannot choose one over the other. So I feel that it is very important for all of us to learn from this real world. Um, like for example, Cuckoo for a school. Like we want our children, we should have our children go to that place as much as possible, interact with the founders, interact with someone who's running it, and helping the world. And I think that all those learnings are very important for the urban children and for the children right now who are again caught up in a very different kind of race. So I think that once that perspective is included in our education, where it's experiential, it's outdoors, it's connected to the ground, it is more closer to life, you understand what it means to be emotionally evolved, what it means to think from the heart as well, what it means, how to kind of look into someone's eyes and kind of learn what that person has given to the world. So all these are very important qualities. And I think that uh, once someone is walking on that educational path, we should ensure that we also walk on this path. And the very like smaller things which one picks up, and then you realize that you don't know enough. Then you realize that you are nothing, you're no one in front of what's happening outside and what people are doing. And that is something which governs my current school of thought, that I want to learn more. I want to learn from life. I also don't want to give up on my scientific lens, because I consider it important. And and I also think that important attributes of honesty, kindness, and reliability are very important if you really want to be successful in the world. That if you have said something, no matter how weak is your product or your delivery, but you're honest about it, then I think that nothing compares to that. And I would say that most of the companies fail in that, and they eventually fall down. I mean, they don't serve what they are saying. And that's what I think, that if one only develops qualities like working on container, human being, you are awakened, you're looking at alternative lens, and you are honest and kind and reliable. I think there are, and even before like these tough times, I think those were the important principles, and a lot of people were living by those principles. Right now we again see media fueling these stories as, oh, now we need to change. Post corona we need to change. Why post corona? Why were you not changing before it? Right? So people have been like that pre corona. Like, they have been working on their mind. They have been in this zen state before corona struck. They have been living with minimal resources. They have been exchanging beautiful stories with everyone around them. So suddenly, with post corona, it becomes relevant. But I think that it is an integral part of human being, that we were living. And I think that the people I met on the streets while I traveled in the past 5 6 years, they were living like that, with that, and with all the innocence. They were not going out and telling anyone that we are living out like this. So I think that this is what I feel, that even post corona, it becomes almost obligatory for our world to live like that. But it should not be just a lip service. It should not be like we just say something and then eventually do something else. And I think that is what waters down everything. That you just, once world comes back to its feet, and then you again go back to those routines, you again become agitated, and you're not inclusive, and you are self-centered, and you are just serving your own interests. If you go back to those those I would say bad ways of living, then there is no point. And I think that this is very important, that we understand these kind of from these times, that it is not a one-off event, but something which is a continuing exercise. Right. You have anything to add to that?
Well, we have a couple of questions. So maybe I'll just go over some of them now, and we could take it from there.
Yes.
You spoke about fluidity. So what do you mean by that? And how does it apply to education?
Right. So fluidity, to begin with, means that when we look at education, we are told that we have to become specialists in the end. Now, how do we become specialists? We are told that let's assume that you have to clear an engineering entrance examination. So your focus at the very beginning of your educational journey right now will be, as the people will say, that physics, chemistry, maths, everything else doesn't matter. You're a mathematician or you're an engineer. So forget about every other subject. And this is your cohort, this is your discipline, this is your domain, and work in this area. So we are forced to kind of choose something which is only related to our field. And then we keep on narrowing ourselves as we go along. In college, we narrow within that subject. Like even in engineering, we have to narrow down again. And even after that, we narrow down again. And this is how we have seen the definition of specialization. And we somehow then take these brackets of either we are artists or scientists or entrepreneurs, and then we start living in these boxes where our interaction to other fields. If I'm a physicist, I perhaps would only start looking at the world with the lens of a physicist. And I may not appreciate or understand what's going on in the other field, or how literature is important or could be important to me. Or if I am a scientist or an engineer, how can aesthetics, or how can learning, like as I mentioned, calligraphy would help me, or like reading literature would help me, or reading Shakespeare will help me. So specialization is pushing us in the direction of getting us in silos and not interacting with other sources of knowledge. If you're under arts, we are only under arts and not under science. If you're under science, we are only under science. And this division of STEM and non-STEM is also an offshoot of this thinking that science, technology, engineering, management is what is paying. Everything else is non-STEM. So STEM students are different, non-STEM students are different. So we have divided the society on the slice the knowledge. Now, once you slice the knowledge, then you start having a lens which is only through that slice. So that's what I think is happening. Now, when you start looking at those who have contributed in extending the knowledge, or great scientists or great artists or great entrepreneurs, or people who have been making some kind of changes, I term them as fluid thinkers, because they have one cut across the knowledge boundaries. They do not see knowledge as arts or science, but they see them as a merged entity. And when you start seeing knowledge as a merged entity and then look at your own domain, then you start seeing it in a very different light. So I use a line which I say that you should be more than what you're taught to be. So what I mean by this is that you're taught to be in your boxes, and these people, these great scientists or Nobel laureates or inventors, they broke that, and they were more scientists, more economists, more businessmen, or more experimenters. They were more than the definition or the label what is visible to our naked eyes. They broke the subject boundaries. For example, I gave example of Dr. Amartya Sen, and I show that how we see that he's an economist, but when we see his journey, we realize that yes, he's an economist, but how did he arrive at this beautiful framework where he's also able to kind of make contribution to the field beyond economics, and his essays, his if I can slot him, although I'm reluctant, like developmental economist. But how did he even arrive at that? What makes his contribution beautiful? It's not only the books which are just prescribed in economics. His understanding of the cultures, the socio-political landscapes, and literature, and his essay on the number of girls missing from India, the female feticide. How does he arrive at that? What is that mind which is able to grasp from these various sources? It's a fluid mind, and that is what I term fluidity. That a mind which cuts across knowledge boundaries and grasps from other. Now, there is a term which people use which is generalist, and people say that someone who is a master of all, or a sort of jack of all, or a master of none. Those are the terms which people use, and that is where I create the distinction. That I say I've devised a fluid wheel, and I say that you, of course, you have to narrow yourself down. I'm not saying that in the end you just become
a jack of all, or you are like, someone who doesn't have any contribution. You in the as in the wheel, there's a fulcrum and there are spokes. Same way, you have a fulcrum of your own. You choose. For example, if you have chosen to create a product, or if you're running a school, or if you are designing a project, that becomes the fulcrum. And the spokes are the knowledge which you gather from all around, from various fields, including all the aspects which are affecting that project. So if sustainability is one aspect and financial is also another aspect, you cut across and collect and gather knowledge from these various angles to make that project viable or sustainable, and not just restrict yourself and say that, oh no, I'm just project designer, I don't know what's happening all around, so I'm in my silos, I'm in my box. So that is what I like I gave example of CV Raman, and I never knew that. I have to be honest that before I attempted Fluid, I did not know that CV Raman had written such a beautiful article on Mridanga, and which is published in Nature. I had no clue. I would, like perhaps many other students, would just see his picture in our classroom, and just that he was a Nobel laureate, and would never know what kind of work he has done. So when I looked at his article, I could not read it, because it was that he was telling us about the finest qualities of mridang as an instrument. And here was this physicist. I would have never thought that how CV Raman would go ahead and research mridang, and he would have to know about the 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 fineness of music in order to come out with his research paper. And I then sat down and kind of, it took me a few days to understand what he has written, and then read it, and I was so happy and so inspired that I never knew it, and I wanted everyone to know about it. That's why I mentioned him in as one of the chapters, that look, if we understand physicists as only someone who's like this boring person who only interacts with books of physics and has no idea of or how what's music, dance, and how these instruments are, it's not like that. I mean, even in our home country, we have seen like Richard Feynman. Like if you see him, you realize that he has cut across the boundaries of physics, and that's why he is so powerful in his analysis and questions. He's a great teacher. Like if you see any of Richard Feynman's videos, you'll realize that for every question or every explanation, he would take it to the level where even a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old understands, and that's a sign of someone who understands the subject properly. So I realized that I included him as an example, that here is the fluid mind who would interact, or who has interacted with other fields and try to enrich his field. So I think that what I mean by fluidity is when you do not restrict yourself uh, in your subject box. And the second aspect, the philosophical aspect of fluid thinking, is it deals with failure, it deals with walking on that straight line, it deals with following the norms of the society. So the other side of fluidity is that when you do not kind of prescribe to those rules which are given to you, that if you want to fail, you can fail. If you're failing, if you're experimenting, it's absolutely fine. If you're choosing a different life for yourself, it's absolutely fine. So the second aspect of fluidity is when in your conduct you are free to experiment with your profession, with your life, with your choices, with challenging any norms of the society. So that's the second part of it, that apart from the learning aspect, it's a way of living aspect, that you're not someone who says that, oh, I fear experiment, or I fear failure, or what will happen if the society is going to judge me, or what will happen if I challenge a norm which I do not like. That is the other aspect of fluidity, that you try breaking those molds which you think are disturbing you, are upsetting you. And one of the kind of parting thoughts on that is that what that does is that if you're living that kind of life and you feel the pressure of society that, oh, what will my village people will say, or what will my city people will say, or what will my relatives say, or what will my friends will say, that, oh, what kind of unconventional life you're living, it gives you the strength to live like that. And that is very important for any society to evolve, that if we develop that strength, that container which kind of sees that, all right, if there are like 10 people, like I was mentioning to you that I don't drink, and initially it was very embarrassing for me to go to a bar and with friends, and then people will kind of try to bring you in that in that direction and say that, oh no, it's fine, and how unconventional you are, how orthodox you are, you're like so outdated. And then I started asking for milk from the bartender, like, do you have hot milk? And the bartender would be like, oh, this is such an unconventional question. So initially you may feel little apprehensive about your choices, but in the end, people will start respecting you for what you are. They may call you a little eccentric, but they will be like, okay, this is how you are, and you have kind of lived this life. So that's the fluidity in the second type, where you just go out and live your life, and you don't kind of feel the pressure. So that's the strengthening of the container. So that's the first question, right?
There's one more, I'll just read it out. As you mentioned, when an individual decides to choose the path of following their mind and passions after an awakening, they're still engaging in a system that values the things that they might be actively choosing to disengage with. In my experience, I found it quite frustrating sometimes to talk or cooperate with people who still value the concepts and guarantees of the rat race, like you mentioned. It's almost as if they don't want to be awakened, and so they dismiss your awakening. I don't believe in imposing my experiences or thoughts on anyone, and neither would I want the same. So, in your experiences, how has it been interacting with people on different paths? Is there something you tell yourself constantly, or a way in which you have dealt with it?
A very, very, very nice question, and I think that it's a very important question. So there are two aspects to it. One is that once you have decided to walk on that path, now it is almost like working on a machine where you may not. So it's like going in that space and coming out, and going in that space and coming out. I don't know what happens with others, but I feel that it's almost like reminding yourself till the time that it strengthens in your head that, okay, I am in this state and it is beautiful and it is serving me, as long as it is serving me. So you have to see it from that perspective, that it is not an act where you would just arrive in the state of enlightenment and you are then in an eternal bliss. I somehow don't feel it like that. That's why I said that if you would ask let people ask you those questions and you're not shying away, and if you're not able to answer them right on the face, like for example, what I do. So I took to bare feet walking a few years back. Now while I'm walking, I would remember all those questions, all those challenges, all those things which are thrown at me, and would try to arrive at an answer, that should I choose this path because now I'm in such a sort of conflict, should I leave it and then let's say take an opportunity which is perhaps with comes with true compromises, should I do that? And this discussion with myself, where I almost treat myself as two, right? So there are two people I'm talking to, like there is a person in front and there is me, and I'm almost having this samvad, this discussion, where it's open, very nice, and with no judgment and with no bitterness, and I'm kind of having this teacher student or like a friend kind of a conversation where I put the question across on these walks. And and I try to arrive at that, should I take this path or not, or, and then invariably this interaction, this communication helps me to remain in that state. And I have, taken a lot of unconventional decisions in my life where it's almost very risky, where, if I had to have a position of a lecturership, I would leave and come out. If I had to kind of go into a mainstream profession, I would perhaps come out. When I had to kind of stay in India, I left and went to West. When I had to stay in West, I left there and came to India at a time where everyone thought that, oh, you must have come back because there's nothing there. No, I mean, I came back because I had to come back. There is no kind of that, system driving my choices. So you take risks, and you take risks with a couple of thoughts. One is that uh, the world doesn't owe to you, right? For example, what I'm saying is that you can't go to the world and say that, oh, look, I'm living an unconventional life, give me some points, right? Or treat me nicely, or, look, give me a pat on the back. It is you who has to do it, right? So the world doesn't owe you. You will walk in the world, and if you are looking for constant validation of what you are doing, then it's a sign of something is shaking inside. It happens with me. If I'm looking for someone and say that, why don't you appreciate me what I'm doing? It happens with you. Then it will shake me, because obviously, unless the happiness is coming from inside, unless it's my strength, my choice, that I want to be in this state, that is something which then you stop looking for external validation. And that's one state that where that's one aspect of the question, where you have to be in that state by constant deliberation, by facing the questions, and also importantly, which I mentioned earlier, that being this inspiring figure. So, sometimes people confuse aspiration, lack of aspiration, or curbing aspiration with choosing alternative life. I do not agree with that. I think that you should be highly aspirational, but in the right direction. No human should curb his aspiration. Even if you are meditating, even if you are keeping yourself calm, it takes a lot of aspiration to walk on that path. So sometimes I feel that people confuse aspiration, that, oh, aspiration means greed. No, aspiration means serving the world. It could also mean you arriving at cure of you arriving at penicillin. It can also mean arriving at this vaccine of corona. It can mean many things. So aspiration is very important, and being aspirational in making your mission successful, again by not compromising on your ethics, will always make you this shining example. And I think that if you are shining example, then also sometimes the sense of validation, or when you are seeking validation, it reduces. So it's important that you remain aspirational in this sense, and you keep on thinking of ideas and solutions and inventions which will help the world. There is no problem in that. I don't think so that's wrong. So I mean, like, there could be two choices, that I'll go to the cave, sit there, not talk to anyone, and I'm in my zen state. Or it could be that, all right, I'm in my zen state, I will be aspirational, I will serve the world, and I will keep on, walking on my mission. So as long as you want to create examples, the the search for validation curbs, like, the desire for external validation, it will go down. And the second path is when somebody comes and not understanding you, or challenging you, or you're walking and saying that, no, this is wrong, and this is not how life should be led. I think that is where you have the strength of reading the right kind of books, preparing yourself as an expert, walking on the path of education, learning, or keep evolving. Because, I feel that, whether it is degree or no degree, absolutely no problem. But walking on the path of wisdom or knowledge or enlightenment, it could be a ladder, it could be a web, it could be anything. That is very important. like a lifelong learning. If you keep on walking that, you will not stale, and you will take on the world nicely. And I think that, if you keep on collecting knowledge, reading right kind of books, I think, or reflecting in your own space and living with that dream of yours or mission of yours in a manner which serves you. So as long as you're able to answer your consciousness every night, and you say that tomorrow morning I'm waking up with this purpose, I don't think so. It'll be difficult. I mean, it's a constant struggle. Life is a struggle. So I think that it's a constant struggle, but you make it beautiful. You can make it beautiful, and I mean, uh, if you have awakened and if you have decided to walk on that path, I think that 50% of the battle is won, and I think the remaining 50% is just to understand that in the end, what will only matter is how you have led the life and nothing else. So it's like, we'll go into the realm of probably enlightenment or philosophy, but that's what I think, that that's how you can probably preserve yourself.
So, as someone who um, as someone who envisions starting a school with its own philosophy and with its own curriculum, how do I understand the basis on which to develop it in order for the students to learn as holistically as possible?
Yeah. So, this is a very important question, and this is where one has to understand fluidity very carefully. Now, without kind of distinguishing between the kinds of schools which are there or the kinds of philosophies which are there, I have to say that when somebody starts a school or starts an education, walking on an educational philosophy, it is often serving your own bias. And I'm talking about even great minds. It's a very big folly which we serve. So I have, like, for example, when I look at the educational ball and I say, this is not right, this is not right, this is not right, this is right. So let me pick up this and start a school or a mission or anything or a foundation on the principles of this particular aspect. And that is something where I think that one has to be very careful about. That, do you understand the ball rather than just an aspect of it? Because in the end, you cannot miss critical principles of learning. You cannot miss them. So, when I came back to India and, lived this completed, the whole circle, it's not that I have kind of started dismissing things which I learned in the past. I challenged them. I thrashed it, but at the end I find them even gold plated, some of it. I find that no, it is very important for us. For example, clinical tracks. Like if I say that if I believe in a school of thought where I feel that most of the pharmaceutical companies are exploitative, vaccination is wrong, and we should probably live with some other principles, and scientific principles of at least developing vaccine is questionable. So if I want to incorporate a philosophy in my school where I say, okay, I would not give you that knowledge, or I would probably bring in my own bias in that, I think we may be doing a little disservice to the child, because it's not me who can eventually choose that this is what you should be learning. I have to be very careful as an educationist to know and be aware of that there are different schools of thoughts, there are important learning ingredients, and if my bias is coming into picture, I always put that bias on the table and say that, look, this is a bias. Because if whatever experiment I start as a school, in the end the child is the eventual person who would benefit or not benefit from it. So if we send children to the outer world where they are incomplete, that is not something which an educational journey should lead to. They should be complete. They should be themselves, be ready to choose and reject knowledge. So that is something which I feel very important, that you should travel on the educational journey, learn as much as possible, read from a variety of resources, thinking that this particular expert or that particular expert is not a full authority on it. And you, before rejecting any principle, you make sure that you're rejecting it not because of bias, not because of your bias, but you're rejecting it because it feels, or because it has gone through the deliberation and reflection, and you've kind of logically justified it. And one of the things which I feel one has to be definitely incorporated is the scientific rigor. One has to be scientifically rigorous. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to. So scientifically, being scientifically rigorous doesn't mean that you follow the evils of science. There is a difference between that. It means that you are very logically arriving at a particular statement or a conclusion. So I think that is something which sometimes we miss, and I'm just mentioning it because I think that sometimes when we're starting an alternative dream, we somehow miss science. But science is not evils of science. Science is science, and everything which we can use it in the right manner. If it is evil of science, then of course it has to be rejected, but not the science itself.
In today's context, when the shift is happening towards e-mediums, how do you perceive education where it primarily focuses on the experiential aspect of it, where the children are actually learning from their own context and understanding the real world through their own experiences? How do you see a model evolving around these? And how you, being an educator or a seeker learner, can develop a model keeping the above aspects in mind?
So I'll first lay out my bias before answering this question. So I have a bias against digital media. That's my personal bias. I was very, I'm very uncomfortable with talking to a screen, seeing children on mobile devices, and learning through, the e-mediums. Even, although I understand the gravity of it, but I somehow feel that, it's excellent for transmission, it's excellent for learning, but it is also quite unidimensional in its servings at this point in time. So if we are looking at the direction where everything is moving online, where you almost start living in this reality illusionary world where you somehow just take children absolutely away from the ground, that will be very dangerous. And I mean, that's my bias, but that's how I come with that. I see digital medium with a lot of carefulness, and I see that like even when I look at the digital solutions which are being sold to the market, again in the garb of commercialization of education. So okay, so like one of the unconventional paths which I took in education is that for me I find it a little uncomfortable when I see so how do I put it? I don't want to sound wrong, but like where education is now also one of the venture capitalist funding space, right? Okay, so people have come to me for ideas that why don't we come up with an idea? We'll fund it. We'll create a company, exit, create a digital solution. Now when I see a lot of digital solution right now, I see them not serving the true principles of education, and also not at the same time not realizing, for example, if I create a monopolistic platform where I make, where millions of teachers become unemployed, where we are not even seeing what will happen to the teachers, or I'm just kind of creating a hype around teaching you maths through digital medium, and then in the end it's something which is just a hype, right? So I see all those questions when I kind of look at the digital medium and how we should use it. And that's my bias, and I want to kind of be very careful about it, that are we taking the market for rides? Are we kind of taking people for ride? Are we just telling them that, oh, you were not learning mathematics properly because your teacher wasn't teaching you properly? Now you come to medium and learn properly. This kind of thought or this kind of narrative is something which I don't agree with. I think that again, the medium has to serve its purpose properly, where I understand that someone who's sitting in remote part of India, not getting the right kind of books or right kind of teachers, uh, and wants to prepare, let's say, for an entrance exam or writing, or you want to write an SOP or an essay, or want to learn how a machine works. Great medium. But eventually, all that has to be brought into the realm of reality. Not that you have to start living like virtual avatars and you just become like zombies sitting in front of computers. So it is the combination where you develop the medium to reduce the cost of education and not increase the cost of education, and also at the same time serve education properly. And the aspect which I feel, and I think that it again, it's a, I mean, I'll just go back to the science and probably what's the other side, but yeah, like it's the science plus, let's say, emotional connect, where there is, I use that word because I don't want to do science and arts. So it's like uh, I see as an educator that that a world, a school, or an experiment which is absolutely sitting in the lap of nature, where you would keep Mother Earth as the center of everything, and you keep the principles of serving others at the center of everything, and then you start devising a curriculum around it, and where a child has to spend a lot of time outdoors, a child has to spend a lot of time learning about the species of plants and how do you plant and how do you kind of and what purpose eventually an education should serve. All those answers should be, questions should be answered, and it could be a physical space, it could even be a digital space, if I break my bias. But I think that it's important that children are not confined into their rooms but are outside. And we have to, I'll just tell you something very interesting, that so I started going to Auroville a few years back, and one day I was kind of in sleeping in my room, and it was like this 10 by 15 room, and a very small room, and like with just a bed on it. And I suddenly realized that there is a distinction between Auroville and any other urban cities, in a way that, and similar places like Auroville, that in urban cities the outer is very hostile. Like when you go out in Delhi, the streets, the pollution, the cars, the clouds, the people, the aggression, everything is like hostile. So you want to come back to your home, and when you want to come back to your home, you make your home more and more comfortable. There should be ACs, televisions, and so you make it more comfortable, because the outside is aggressive. The outside is very, it doesn't serve your soul. But in Auroville or any other place, such places after that, when I started traveling, I felt that inside there is nothing for me to just a bed and I just want to sleep and just go out, because outside is so beautiful. I have to interact with trees, I have to talk to birds, I have to, look at people, and this place is just serving me to stay in my particular place. And this is complete upside down on how we have devised our urban spaces. It pushes us to be inside, and outside is just like, we just leave it without even kind of paying any attention to it. So I think we should just, even in our education, more outdoors, more outside. And I think that that's what I feel. And in curriculum, I would probably have a mix of science. I mean, for me, keeping the Mother Earth at the center, and also, stacking aspirations and subjects in a fluid manner and all. So I haven't thought of it, but yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
So this question is from a student.
Yeah.
As a student, I'm dependent on a lot of people right now who don't really appreciate the way I think. How do I go about it other than waiting to become independent, because I can't ask others to think like me?
Yeah. The way you have framed the question, it shows that you can think very wisely at your age, if whatever age you are. I mean, I couldn't even have, put across my question like this if I, at your age perhaps, if you're a student, because, in your question is hidden a very evolved and a very blissful mind. Uh, so you at the same time want to be independent, but at the same time you are kind of in a situation where you do not want to confront uh, this eventuality with aggression. So I think that, see, this is a bit of a tragic question, and I think that uh, unfortunately most of the students or children right now have to go through this, where uh, you know something is going on in our mind, and we are around people, and there's a caveat here. There is a I want to kind of answer that with this point also, that sometimes parents, teachers, or the society, or even some people, they may not be coming with bad intentions. It is the way. See, it's evolution not only involves that you are you know um, better educated, but you're also able to almost act like a teacher. So most often what lacks is that in our kind of teachers and in our parents or society, is that the true definition of teacher is missing. So we want the best out of students, but somehow, or our children, but somehow we do not know how to communicate it. So either we will do with that, with following the order, like the line order theory, that okay, you have to do this, or sometimes you will I mean, in India, which is I mean, I would never see, at least in front of me, that I would like when sometimes children are beaten, or sometimes children are they're pressurized to the extent, because the other person is thinking that this is your path, and if you will mess it up now, you will lose this golden opportunity, or this time which will never come back. And they also are coming with a lot of baggage of the past. Not necessarily that they're evil, or not necessarily that they do not mean well for you. They have seen poverty, they have seen extreme poverty, they have seen how people are kind of walking on the path of competition and aggression in the market. So they somehow feel for you, and rather than explaining you beautifully or philosophically, they would just give you an order that this is it, now just do it. If they know everything, it eventually may help you, like if they push you in the direction of preparing for this entrance exam, and then you clear it, and in the end you become something, and then you look back and say, oh, all right, my parents pushed me and I have now reached this stage. But what's happening now is that what parents have to realize also, that it's not uh, it's not always possible that what they know will eventually come out to be the truth, given the changes, given how the world will change. So, choice of professions, choice of what one should do or not. Uh, if someone is so sure about it that, okay, or like I have a shop, you should sit on my shop. Why are you wasting your time? Or, you should, why are you studying arts and you should just study engineering? So one is that, they're not coming with bad intentions. And the second is that, how do you, how do you resist this? Like, I mean, it's a difficult question, and I have to be honest here and not give you some kind of, just a, a motivational gyan. Like, I'll give you my example that, so my dad and mom both are doctors, and my sister was in medical school when I was in my 12th standard. So, I mean, there was nothing else for me. Like, I had to become a doctor. There was nothing else. I had never seen any other subject. Now, there was something at the back of my mind where I was just not ready. And if I go back into that time, I can really sympathize with you that um, how did I do it? How did I resist it? And how did I come out of it? I just kind of, probably was little more like I hoped for the best. I mean, I said that I don't want to be a doctor, and then I had this entire life in front of me, which I had absolutely no clue. I had read nothing apart from biology, physics, chemistry in my life. I didn't even know that, what am I going to do if I'm not becoming a doctor? So it was quite confusing and challenging at that time, and everyone was telling me that, are you mad? You don't even know that, what you're giving up on. The only, consolation which I would say that, perhaps after some time, people just gave up and they said, okay, fine, just leave him, because he would not listen to what he's, probably what we are saying. So I think that, little more resistance, perhaps little more conviction in what you're doing. And, I would just end that with this particular point, that even if because of some pressure you do something and you end up in a degree or a choice which you, because I get a lot of emails, and one of the emails I'll mention without mentioning the name, that this beautiful soul, I'm like extremely hurt after reading his message. Now he says that he's from Kerala, and he said that, I was, he used the word manipulation, and I was so sad to read it. He said that my parents manipulated me to read engineering, and now they want me to go to outside India and do masters, and I'm in a corporate job and I don't even know what am I doing, and I just would completely, at loss at what should, how should I resist it. And I think that, this is something which I told him, that even if you have wasted 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of your life, you are in a degree which you don't like, life gives you so many chances that you don't have to hold on to that identity. Don't hold on to it. Just give it up. Don't say, I mean, it's not, who's going to judge you that, okay, so you go out in the world and say, okay, I was an engineer, but now I'm something else, and will somebody laugh at you? No. If somebody is laughing, it's their problem. So you can give up on your identity at any time. Even if I'm 80 or I'm 70 and I want to give up on an identity and say that, no, now I'm a gardener, now I'm a tree planter. What will the world say? Let them say what they say. I mean, like, I will give up my identity at any age, and you have to think that, you have so much time at hand that, this is not the end of the world. If you not end up in your university, choice of university, your profession, whatever it is, uh, it is absolutely insignificant, because you can reset the button of your life whenever you want. It doesn't matter at all. Doesn't matter at all. I mean, I have reset my lives button. I am still ready to reset my life button. Tomorrow I may wake up and say that, okay, hang on, I don't want to do this. Let me do something else. As long as I'm earning my livelihood and I'm kind of not dependent on anyone, nobody has any right to question me.
The next question, is there a relationship between spirituality and fluidity or the connectedness of things? How do you see this? Why do you think Steve Jobs lived in the house designed by Joseph Elko? Or why do you think we're having a conversation with you right now? Do you think this is also an effect of chaos theory, reason for which we will realize much later in the future?
So it's a realm I right now refrain talking about, because I don't want to give sort of statements which are probably not coming. So I'm not sure about what happens after life, and uh, is there a realm or a dimension which is beyond uh, what we see or what we feel and observe. I can say few things with surety, and that only applies to me, and I would not say as a statement. I somehow feel that there is something beyond, in terms of how we understand and perceive. So that much I can say for myself, and if anyone wants to take something out of it, a person is welcome. Now, when I say there is something beyond, what I mean is that the way we perceive knowledge today and pursue knowledge and understand life through the lenses which are given to us, I think that there is something beyond. So if it's a purely lens of, let's say, matter and antimatter and space and universe and dark matter, I would say there is something beyond this lens. If there is a lens which says that, you know, it's purely survival, you are just a species, just a sophisticated species who can, who merely, do better than some other species, or, you are just this nuts and bolts and nothing else. I would say there's something beyond it. If somebody tells you that, oh, you are giving too much importance to what goes on in your heart and mind, and you are nothing but, this is just a result of the cognitive, I would say, discrepancies, I would stop and say that there is something beyond. So what I feel is that what fluidity does is that, like, I read across without even, and listen to people without even associating any judgment to them, whether they are gurus, whether they are scientists, whether they are artists, or whether whosoever they are. I listen to them very carefully, and as a true learner, when I say as a true learner, I would not say things which are so. I mean, I can tell you something which I a little later on learning, but that what a true learner means. But just to sort of say that a true learner uh, would not associate any bias or any judgment while he's receiving knowledge. So when I am listening to a guru, I'm listening to a scientist, reading someone who claims to be enlightened, or who says that, there is enlightenment. I would read it, embrace it, and my essence, or my conclusion at this point is that there is something beyond. And what fluidity does to you, as long as you are true to fluidity, which means that you're not tilting and you are collecting from everywhere with the same kind of balance, it may take you in the realm of things which others have not reached. It may take you in the realm of that beautiful space. And I think that there is a beautiful space. And because I've seen a lot of scientists troubled, I've also seen a lot of gurus troubled. So I feel that, when both are troubled, what is troubling them? That, is it something else? So I feel that there is a beautiful space which you have to reach by combining the worlds, combining the knowledge, and is there synchronicity? Is there a reason why we are here? Is there a reason why we are talking? You know what? I'll tell you something that I feel there is. Uh, I may be wrong, but I just feel it. I just feel it, and here I am. I will be, getting a lot of brickbats from my science friends. But you know, um, I just feel that people attract their tribes. People attract certain events, circumstances, epiphanies, serendipities. Uh, there's a lot of things. If you carry beauty in your eye, if you carry kindness in your heart, if you carry some kind of seeking, which is finding these kind of experiences, you will find them. So I don't know whether it is coincidental, whether it is probability, whether it is something else, but let's not get into the analysis of that or try to rationalize it. But it happens. So even if it happens because of purely rational reasons, because you are seeking and hence it is seeking you, but so what? So I think that if because once we get into the realm of poetry, and when we start kind of keeping our mind aside and start looking through heart, and sometimes being silly, sometimes being irrational, sometimes being as long as we are not hurting anyone, as long as we are not kind of pushing an agenda, there is nothing wrong in it. And I think that that's what fluidity does to you, that you keep collecting these alternative point of views, just so that you reach to that beautiful space where you are able to live a life where you bring a smile to somebody's face. That's enough. And I think that that's the biggest spirituality. And if you're at peace, if you can plant a tree, if you can look at a child and make him or her realize that the world is a beautiful place, I think you've done your job. So I think, yeah.
So I'm combining a couple of questions now.
Yeah.
Education has become globalized. Everybody is learning the same thing. Is there value in going back to indigenous learning or localized systems of learning, and even to the point of maybe learning in our indigenous languages?
Yeah. So I have to answer this carefully. So uh, native language, importance of your culture, importance of being in a situation where your genes have been for thousands of years, uh, the evolutionary intelligence, the importance of the civilization from where you emerge, the combination of that, so all that is profound, supremely important, and I can't express that how crucial they are for getting a conducive environment to you, like just a hug from your mother, your place where you're born, your language, your dishes, your food, what you have learned. If it brings I'm not saying that the superstition which are attached to it, but like all this is supremely important, and your mind is attuned because it has it's and it is quite natural, because you have been as a gene living in that circumstance for such a long time. And so what happens is that, again, because subject experts are working in different departments, so there is an anthropologist who's sitting very scientific, who would be saying a lot of things around that, but somehow who is sitting in an evolutionary biology department and not practicing it in the right manner, may not know what that anthropologists mean, right? Or he would not perhaps pay much heed to what that even means. right? So if that physicist or a biologist is someone who has read across social sciences and has understood, because what confuses me and what kind of troubles me is that once we start following that educational path, and invariably because most of us follow the hard sciences path, and also the frameworks which are currently laid down, it leaves no room for the things which are mentioned in the question. And somehow we get confused and start blaming, start calling everything which is ours as redundant, or saying that, oh, this is absolutely nonsensical, or then we start using these terms which are bitter, which are not even right, which are not even correct. Like, it's not that I'm saying that, oh, no, no, deal softly. I'm saying that it is very dangerous, that if you say that I'll give up on my native language, it is dangerous. Because why are you doing that? You have to understand that, because, like, I'll tell you a very interesting example that I was reading an article which said that uh, now mothers should not have the newborn babies. They should not be sleeping with them just by holding them. They should just leave them in the cradle and then let them cry. Okay, and then and this is what it does. It strengthens their lungs. Blah blah blah, and pretty decent journal. So I was talking to my wife, and I was discussing with it. She said that, to hell with it, I will never do it. Because she said, I can never, my instinct will never let me do it. And she continued with her act. It gave her whatever satisfaction, pleasure it gave. And a few years down the line, I read an article which negated that article and it said that no, that's not right. So suddenly you are caught up in this knowledge crisscross where you think, oh, hang on, what if somebody would have read that article and done that, right? So reaching to those conclusions based on where you reject everything what is indigenous and which has been working perfect. Now, like things like ghee, people coming back to ghee, things like your food, people coming back to your food. Like music was there, like in southern India, music was there in like every household, right? And then suddenly this 50 years, 40 years, things came where it was like, oh, no, 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 like it's like what it will bring to us. And suddenly then you realize that, oh no, it was an important part of it. So it's not like you're glorifying the past, but you have to understand carefully the importance of that particular aspect of that indigenous intelligence or wisdom. And you also have to be careful about what have you gained by giving up on these many things and realizing its importance. That if you walk on that path, giving up on everything, has it brought peace to you or not? So I think that I consider it as quite dangerous when educational pursuit or the eventual aim of education is where you just say that, oh, this person is an illiterate, he doesn't know much about it, or this person is that. And that is where it's important to understand the subjects and read widely, that where you just not give up on things. Like right now in the world there is this great clash happening across these thoughts where people are like kind of conflicting with each other, holding on to their cultures, holding on to their civilization. So it's like it's all about, because people feel the pressure, people feel that this is not right, this is we lose our identity. So I think that one has to be very careful about how do you approach that. And I think as an educationist that anything which is ingrained in your indigenous knowledge, if it's wisdom, one has to be very careful before rejecting it.
This is something we've also discussed. I feel we're very privileged and blessed in all senses to be able to have such a conversation in such a space and time on fluidity. Do you think the idea of fluidity is a very privileged one, or is it something that happens with everyone? And also, is the sense of fluidity, is everybody cut out for fluidity? And are we just privileged enough to talk about it? Where do you place your idea of fluidity in the economic and social scale?
So, firstly, I don't think that fluidity is to be associated with privilege, uh, because I think that it's almost mandatory if we understand it completely. And what it entails is, it doesn't mean that you are only able to you will only practice it if you are accessing this knowledge from across mediums, through expensive books, through expensive mediums, and then you have time at hand where you are able to kind of learn across the mediums. Now, as you read fluid, and I, as I said, that as I mentioned in the later part when I am explaining fluid specialist, I start with Vishnu Dharmotram Puranam. I start with that text, and I said that it's a long lost Puran, and I was quite surprised that not many people knew about it. And when I was so I was quite particular about that. I have to read from the original source, and I kept on searching for this particular text for a very long time, and I could not get hold of it. And I'll if I have it with me here, and I eventually got hold of it. Wait a second. So it's three volumes, and it's like, so I wanted to kind of read it and understand that if it's communicating the idea of fluidity or holistic learning, is it true, or is it just a made up concept where somebody has said that, okay, Vitruvian man arrived, or the Hans Purush or the Hans Stri arrived from this text? So I found this text, went through it, and when I'm reading the shlokas of this and trying to interpret them, I realized that it is very much ingrained in the framework of our scientific pursuit in the past. Whether it was privileged or not, that's a debatable question. But if in terms of time, I think that it's about the framework, that in Vishnu Dharmotram Puranam, when they say that, when the king asks Markandeya, that Rishi Markandeya, that I have to learn the art of statue making, and he says that you go first learn the art of dancing. He says, all right, I'll go and learn the art of dancing. He said, in order to learn, then teach me how to dance. And he said that in order to learn dance, you have to first learn what is, music. He said, all right, first I learn the art of music. He said that, teach me art of music. So he says that in order to learn the art of music, you have to know the Gadya and Padya. So he takes him through the whole circle and says that the knowledge from the universe, it's integrated, it's combined. You have to not. So the essence of that conversation was that holistic education, holism as a concept, is not privilege. So fluidity is nothing, but it emerges from the concept of holism, where you start seeing knowledge not as an isolation. And here, if like when I see that it's quite encyclopedic, this text, very interesting. In fact, one should translate it, because the volume 1 of this text is almost telling you how to plant trees, what should be the distance between, and I don't even know that not many people, I did not know that there's a shlok in a text which says that if you plant trees which are 10 feet away, you will not have fruits. If they are 15 feet away, they are madhyam. So it's like madhyam, uttam, and not great. So it's like it's telling you the distances of how to plant trees. Now, learning how to plant trees is an aspect of fluidity which is missing from the mainstream. So it's not privilege in the sense as perhaps it may appear, that it's only for people who would. It could appear as a privilege in the modern system of education, where we have kind of monopolized education and made it expensive, and from away from the hands of people. Otherwise, it's a concept which is not privileged and not elite concept at all. Now the second aspect is that uh, where the general concept of privilege comes in, which we were discussing, that when I'm practicing fluidity, um, and how sort of will it serve in the modern system, or the system where specialists are kind of being promoted? So is it just exercise to love subjects and just be in your space and be happy about it? I don't think so. That when I explained the examples, the people in our book, including Steve Jobs, including Charles Darwin, including C.V. Raman, I just wanted to point out that in the economical ladder, in the ladder of inventions and contributions to the world, you will gain a lot if you have a fluid approach to your projects or to your subject. It will make you less redundant and less like a machine, and you will retain your job and retain your ideas in a much robust manner than if you're not fluid. You can be anyone, you can even be Google, and if you're not practicing fluidity, I think that you may lose your advantage soon. So it's something which is the part of the container and not the content, and I think that it is very important to embrace it at whatever limited level one can do. And it is not privilege at all, it is just a mindset where you cut across, and you will eventually realize that you know um, if you're just open to the idea of it, even like I go to a few, I went to few IITs last year, and my favorite question was asking them that, what do you read, and which books you read. So I mean, IIT is a pretty privileged place, I mean, like, they are pretty sorted in their future careers and all. Hardly any, people are not reading books. So at best there was one guy who told me that I read this particular novel, but apart from him, the anything which was outside the curriculum or outside the mainstream reading, which is prevalent, it wasn't it wasn't common. And I think that IIT is such a privileged or a elite place if we compare it to the other engineering colleges. So it's just a approach to education and the mindset, and I think it's not how it seems like.
Do you think that if alternative education eventually became mainstream, that it would kind of lose its authenticity? And connected to that, do we need to be pushed to think differently, given an order, almost like you were talking about, to cherish our freedom or to look at things differently? That seems to be the only way that this any kind of alternative lifestyle can be implemented. At the same time, I realized that that goes against its original intention or vision. This confuses me a lot, and I don't know what to do about it.
Reflecting on the questions, I sometimes feel that the questioners are more wise than me to answer these this question. Uh, so okay, so this question is partly romantic, partly education related, partly philosophical, and I'll try answering it by probably cutting across disciplines. Uh, you know, uh, there is a there is some merit in solitude. There is some merit in pursuing uh, a life where you are alone, and where there are few, and you sit quietly, and you probably have a dog around you, or a sheep around you, and then a goat around you, and you feel happy. You are not among millions of people, and you're not in this hustle bustle. And an alternative school is just a slight bigger variation of the solitude, where you want to have this beautiful um, space in the whole world which is kind of preserves its purity and innocence, and you like it because it is alternative. Um I think that those experiments will continue to happen and should happen and are happening, will happen. And like, for example, I as an individual am mainstream, am solitude, go to alternative places, live in ashrams, go to universities, go to New York, and cut across the realms of experiences. When I am in an urban setting, I try carrying my alternative soul with me to that place. When I am in an alternative place, I try bringing some urban mind to that place where I think that uh, am I completely in a situation where I'm apart, away from the world's problems, and not thinking of that how to bring this beautiful idea to other people. So I think like that. Now, if we bring alternative to the mainstream, I don't think so that it is going to do any harm, because uh, when I say alternative, when we were discussing the question of what kind of a dream school we should create, and where we bring thoughts from across the disciplines, that school is perhaps better than the mainstream ones, and we should always aim, and we are aiming, and educationists always aim to improve mainstream education, and they improve it and reform it to the betterment of the planet or the world. I mean, that's the idea, that's the notion. There's no harm in doing that. Will the entire schooling space change? I am quite hopeful that it also will change. There is a possibility, and I am quite hopeful that we will start looking at schools in a very different manner, and probably even 10 years down the line, you will see that schools have changed dramatically. All the monopolistic practices which are there in school will crumble. When I say monopolistic practices, today, if there is a good school, it's a struggle to get into that school. The fee is high, and there is this exclusion practice in schooling, that, oh, I got in, you didn't, right? My child got in, your child couldn't. And that monopolistic attitude is something which makes it little, it's one of the most, I would say, the curses of educational system at this point in time, where it's like, you are crumbling schools which can serve the weaker ones, and these monopolistic schools, or the system is kind of turning in that direction. Now, you need to improve that. You need to improve the curriculum. You need to make it better in that sense. And you also need to introduce the child, when it comes to the curriculum, to this aspect of life. Now, by that standard, it remains mainstream, but better version. Philosophically, the experiments, the solitude, the alternative schools, the forest schools, they will remain, and it will not be that every school in the world will turn into a forest school. I mean, if it happens, it's great, but if it doesn't happen, then still, you will have a space for a forest school which is not conventional, and you can go there, because sometimes when we think as a human being and not professional being, we kind of relate to that solitude, that alternative life more than the mainstream life. But we cannot completely turn the world into that direction. So I think that awakened mind, and especially the one asking question, has this advantage of best of both the worlds. That you keep serving to change the mainstream world, to look at Earth, and in with better lenses, with better eyes, and at the same time you carry on with your beautiful experiences, collecting, knowledge, contributing to the planet, spending time with your tribe, and even spending time with your own self and in solitude with your musical instrument, with your, whatever gadget you are comfortable with, and be at peace, like, kind of in that framework.
Are there any, is there any criticism that you've received on your books? And have you thought about it later after research and maybe stood by your perspective or changed your perspective?
Yeah. So, okay. First, I'll start with saying good things. So uh, I was quite happy. I'm quite happy when people write to me, uh, because I have received so many beautiful emails, uh, that, I just, I'm a bit humbled after receiving them, because I felt that I connected to so many souls out there who were kind of in a conflicting space. So that's a good part of it. I really am happy that it is serving some purpose, and it is giving an indication or a direction to someone that, okay, uh, this is also not something which I'm struggling with, but this is a way of life, and it has also led to a lot of great minds achieving great results. So, to that extent, I feel that, as because any text or any book is just a book. It's not the finality or the final word on anything, and that has given a lot of happiness to me. Criticisms, so I'll tell you something, like, uh, and here, okay, so I sent my book to my professor, my draft to my professor at Oxford, and I mean, I can be very open about it, and so, my professor read it and said that you have written clearly, you have written transparently, you have assembled it nicely, but have you said anything profound? There was a question mark at the end. But have you said anything profound? I thought of it, and I said that, well, not by his standards. So, and then I thought over it, and I replied him back, and I said that, well, I think that maybe there are few examples where I tried. So, if you see it from a thesis perspective, from a research perspective, from the perspective of whether I've discovered a new knowledge, because that's what my professor was pointing to, that have you discovered a new piece of knowledge? Um, have I discovered a new piece of knowledge? Perhaps, I don't know. No, I have given few fresh examples. I have assimilated in a better manner. I've the writing is original. The examples are not like, I've kind of taken from here and there. I've given fresh analysis to them. But discovered new knowledge, I'm not sure about it. Probably not. It's not an academic book. So one of the criticism which I received was that, what you're saying has been said before in different terms, where people have kind of pointed to it in, like C.P. Snow wrote a book probably in '60s, where The Clash of Two Cultures, where he was pointing to that, he saw artists and scientists fighting, and there are two cultures prevalent in education and all that. So, of course, people have been talking about it, and it's one of the most common themes if you look at it. And yes, of course, fluidity is what have been kind of pointed out. People have been practicing. I'm giving examples of, like, people. It may not be coming under that term, but when we talk about Amartya Sen or Steve Jobs or Charles Darwin and H.G. Wells and all. So, of course, they were fluid thinkers. There's no doubt about it. Whether they knew the term fluid thinking or not, I don't know. One of the criticisms was that, I'm pushing generalization over specialization, and I have stick to that.
because I've reflected over the fluid wheel model of learning, and I've found it quite helpful, and I have stick to my guns that no, if I have to choose between narrowing down and fluidity, I would any day choose fluidity. I am not uh, proposing you to become a generalist in the sense of the word. I'm telling you to choose your focal point very carefully, but never restrict yourself from collecting from other disciplines. So there's a difference between the way we understand the word generalist. So fluid wheel, I've stood on the fluid wheel and I have found it quite robust, quite robust. So till now, I have stood on it. I have not found a criticism which I would update the fluid wheel. So I have, in fact, interestingly, and it may help people. So I designed my own fluid wheel. I'll tell you something that right now I'm designing my fluid wheel. I want to put my life's current purpose in the center, uh, and I want to kind of bring learnings from all the spokes, but I want to write it down right in the middle. That this is what I want to do in education. Is this the project I want to do in education? Is it the book I want to write right now? So I am practicing the model, and I have not found it. It has helped me a lot when I design my fluid wheel. It opens me up to answer questions which I sometimes may miss, that financial questions or other kinds of questions dealing with that particular project. So I think it's quite helpful in that sense, and it has stood, at least, I mean, it has been a year, so it has till now not kind of, I've not arrived at any deficiency to it, because I consider it quite robust.
So you came from like a family of doctors. So where and how did this idea of fluidity sort of come about? And also, along with that, maybe a whole other question, but what after fluidity?
Yeah. For me or for the world? For you?
You for the word.
Yeah. So, I probably only started as a failed doctor, or someone who failed to get into medicine. And then, what was next? And that time I was like, okay, management, or, probably doing a startup, or, something which is, mm, I had no choice. Like, I probably was lost, and kind of my initial few years would probably be a reflection of doing things which I probably just did because I had to. I landed up in Bangalore doing a startup. I was part of IIM Bangalore Incubation Center for a couple of years. Uh, and this startup coincidentally was also on knowledge management. Again, the startup failed. And once my Bangalore journey kind of was ending, I was kind of thinking that, hang on, like what I want to do, like, what am I good at? Because, suddenly when you are given a situation where you are not, where you don't have a path, you then start thinking of what path to walk on. And that's why, like, I think that this Corona time is quite crucial for us to kind of reflect on the kind of paths we can walk on. You have the time to kind of think that, okay, this is the path I want to walk on. So out of all the crazy sort of things I've done, I left for this few months backpacking journey, going to these mountains and these sort of foothills, and kind of, I don't know, not to identify what I want to do, but just like kind of thinking of that, why am I here? What it means for me to, what kind of thing I can do. And I arrived at this definition of, I said that, okay, I love to teach, I like education, I want to find the purpose of life, and these are the questions, and I love to exchange views and share, and I want to pursue Gyan Yoga, or the knowledge, or that's what I felt very close to. And that was probably the trigger that pushed me in the direction of education and finding, and like 15 years back, like there was no one who would perhaps
advise me to choose the field. I mean, like people were becoming engineers and doctors left, right, and center. What is education like? So it wasn't that I chose a lucrative profession to get into. It was a pursuance, which again, I met one of a wise man professor who told me that I wanted to start a school because I thought that I'm good in teaching. And he said that, why don't you pursue the field of education and first learn what exactly it means. And I've never stopped learning. So I uh, took the subject as a trick, as like, I mean, I wanted to train myself as an educationist or a social scientist, and to understand what has all gone in the field. And I think that that is what perhaps led me to where I am. And I think it wasn't planned at all. And uh, the years I've spent, I've kind of, it has become stronger and stronger in my mind that I would probably, if the time and world I mean, if the circumstances will allow me, I will keep serving education as my probably. I mean, I almost worship education and try to kind of figure out new, thoughts or ideas or school models or university improvements, and I don't know, fluidity after fluidity. What? So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I have written another book which was about to release, and I wrote sort of a continuation of Fluid, which if lockdown wasn't there, it would have come out. And it's a book which I felt that could take the idea of fluidity further. Um, so right now, I am kind of interested in keep on putting my thoughts onto paper and also arrive at some kind of anchor where it's a, I don't know. I mean, I'm quite not prepared to open a school of mine at this point in time because I'm not. It's not coming from inside. So some kind of a project or endeavor or mission or something where I probably would want to spend the next 5 years of my life or 10 years of my life. So that's why I'm designing that fluid wheel. That okay, what is there in the center now? That should I want to? I just want to kind of go ahead with something or not. And for anyone who's practicing fluidity or wants to practice fluidity, for them, I think that start by designing your fluid wheel. Start thinking from the perspective of the next 10 years. And if you put any project or an idea of yours, whether it is pursuing to become an expert if you're a youngster, then what is the final culmination of becoming that expert? Is it, do you want to do a master's or a PhD or what? Try putting it in that and then see that how is it serving your life, your relationships, your philosophy, your emotions. How is it doing? Like, are you serving those interests, and is it sitting beautifully in the center or not? And if you want to start any project, if you're after your education or your learning life, then put your dream in the center and uh, narrow yourself at the same time, expand yourself, and then narrow yourself and expand. And I think that's what I think is perhaps what next after fluidity. Yeah.
So, the last question that we
Okay.
ask everybody, if you could tell us 5 books and maybe 5 documentaries that you would recommend to especially the youth.
Wow. 5 books. Are there any books around? I'm just checking. I mean, to start with, people should read Harari. I mean, he's a great writer. So *Sapiens* or *Homo Deus* or 21 Lessons for 21st Century. So I think one should read Harari. One should also read *Early Indians* by Tony Joseph. I think that's a nice book. That's a good book. One should read. It's a good book. I mean, there were a few things I kind of in the end probably I found that it lagged in few things, but it's a good book if one can read. If you are from India, because it's a good book if you are from India. So that's the second book which is coming to my mind. One should read Richard Feynman, like compulsorily. His books, Surely You Must Be Joking, or the other one. So I think that's one another book which I think I find quite helpful. What else? Is there any book here? I'm just kind of looking at my collection and thinking that because to arrive at 5 books is kind of yeah. Then there are the usual Plato's book, or Aristotle's Socrates' work. Uh, Origin of Species. If somebody is not from science side, one should read Origin of Species. I think that is something which it's a great book. Um, what else? Okay, there is one book which I don't know whether people will find or not. I think I have it here. Is it here? Okay, there is one book which I will also show, and I'll read it from. I'll read the title. So this book I found in probably one of the obscure places, and this is a book, I don't know, you'll find it online. You'll surely find an online version from archive.org. Uh, it's called Schools of Helas, or Hellas, how you pronounce it. So it's a thesis work on how the schools were in the time of Romans. And it's a very interesting book. If I can show it to you, I mean, it's all crumbled and stuff like that. It's a very interesting book, and it's like a very old edition, like probably, yeah, it's about 100 years old book, what you're seeing, 110 years old. So it is, it's how this, an essay on the practice and theory of ancient Greek education, 600 to 300 BC. So it's a good example of how schools were during those times, and I found this book very helpful. What else? I don't know. I can't remember any other book, but yeah, I think there are the usual Kite Runner. If one, I mean, that's a very beautiful book. Then Gabriel Maracasa, he's a good writer. Yeah, so books wise, if I can cut across, these are the books which comes to my mind. Yeah. Any other book? Yeah. Okay, I was recommended one book to read, and that book has now become like one of my favorite books. It's a very simple book. It's called Jungle Trees of Central India. It's just a book written where there's a mention of all the tree varieties of Central India, from where I come from. So it's like it has given me like a lot of inputs into the varieties of trees which were natives, and because I'm interested in plantation and I keep on planting trees there, so I try to find those varieties which were mentioned in those books. So the trees of India, or trees of your region, I think it's an important text to read. And documentaries, can't remember on. Well, The Flaw. There is a documentary called The Flaw. It's on how the economic system is geared towards making money and not production, and equality. So there's a documentary which I saw. But then there was a documentary which I really loved. It's called Super Size Me. So it was a so there was this guy who lived on McDonald's diet for 30 days and recorded it. And so I saw it long back, and I found it really exciting, and it was quite insightful to see 10 years back. And so it's a very good piece of work. Then there are lots of good documentaries on conservation, and One Child Nation. Has anyone seen that? That's on Amazon Prime. It's the sort of the backs and sort of the inside story of what happened in China after the one-child policy was implemented. That's one. Then I can't remember the names of few. I saw one where one barren land was transformed into this beautiful biodiverse place by a couple. I saw it in Oroville. I can't remember the name of the documentary. That's one I really loved. Yeah. So yeah, that many names come to my mind. Yeah. Is that enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Was it by any chance the last documentary that you mentioned about Sebastian Salgado? Because
Uh,
him and his wife were the first people to come to mind when you spoke about transforming a land. Or
Probably, yeah.
is Sadhana Forest is what
No,
someone is saying.
it wasn't Sadhana Forest. It
Okay.
was no, it wasn't Sadhana Forest. I saw one in Sadhana Forest, by the way, which is on Sadhana Forest. So so that's a good documentary to see. But this was it in the US or I don't know. Like this was, but it was a very interesting documentary because it was there was a gentleman who was leading the couple to create this preserve, and sadly, while on the way, the person he died because of cancer, but the couple continued. So I think if somebody remembers the documentary, so if it comes to my mind, then I'll. But it was how you created this whole sort of biosphere by right from the scratch, and the important bits of it and the frustration of the couple and stuff like that. So it was very beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think with that we come to the end of the session. Though I think everyone would agree with the fact that we could keep going on for hours and hours.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was useful or not, but yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed. I could see the people through you, so I felt that I'm talking to some people.
Yes. I would like to dedicate this session to all the youngsters who understand and feel fluidity, but in some sense are solidified by society. I'd also like to thank Professor and architect Samar Ramachandra from Hyderabad, who introduced this beautiful creation, Fluid, to us, and of course to the creator of this, to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure, and I think that I should just say that all the youngsters who, as you said, that they uh, feel that they are being sort of forced to walk on this path, or they want to walk on an alternative path, or they want to do something else, but feel the pressure and feel the conflict inside. I think just hold on to it and hold on to your thoughts. And I can just say, by someone who's slightly ahead in terms of age, that by the time you reach there, and if you've held on to those thoughts, your life will appear more fulfilling and nothing will go wrong. You'll not feel that you have lost on anything. You'll not feel that you have failed. You'll not feel that you have not achieved, you have not ticked boxes of the society. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing, heavens will not fall. So I think that, just hold on to that thought, and you will get ample of opportunity to keep evolving on that path. So it's not the end of the world, just this time to keep on going. So I think that just hold on to it, and yeah, keep be fluid. That's what I can say.
These are real words of hope. So thank you so much. And
My
please do
pleasure.
visit Cuckoo
I will,
sometime.
as I said, that as soon as the lockdown opens, I will be there, and not only as a visitor but as a volunteer. And it'll be my pleasure and an honor to be there like a volunteer and work with Cook for a School. I mean, I have genuinely felt right the word go, and as you wrote in that beautiful email of yours, that I immediately connected, and I felt that why I wasn't at this place before.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You take care, and everyone, Thanks for coming and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's switch off the system.
Yes, I'll just switch it off. Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.